All right, good evening, everyone. John Henry Soto here, along with George Batista. Welcome to Counterparts. I am super excited. I don't know about you, George, but I am super excited. What do you think?
Absolutely. Me too.
This is going to be an epic night.
Yes.
Mauricio Bustamante is going to be on the show this evening, and we're going to, I'm just going to bring him on because, George, you and I can chat, and we don't want to chat. We want to chat to Mauricio, so let's bring him on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Mauricio Bustamante. Oop, hold on, one thing. Yeah.
There he is. All
Good evening.
right.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much for being on. We're extremely excited to have you on because
Me too.
yeah, your history is amazing. You have some great stories that we want to hear. We also want to have some input for some younger, or not younger necessarily, just anyone that wants to need some motivation in this crazy industry that we all love. And I think that that's really one of the joys of having you on.
Thank you. No, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of wonderful reasons to motivate artists that want to really dedicate their life to. And what Lee Strasberg used to say is, you don't need passports between the arts. Once you're an artist, that's an artist, and that kind of commitment, that kind of uh, commitment, really is what it
Yeah.
takes.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I want to start off by asking you about how, Mexico City, how did that trip to New York City, how did that come about?
Well, it was a wild adventure that started on my 13th birthday in Mexico City when we were at a restaurant celebrating my birthday, my mom, my brother, and I. And it's a normal family restaurant, but the most famous human in television walked in the door and there were no tables available. So I went over there and I said, "You want to sit down with us?" And he did. He gave me all kinds of advice about the industry. How some days you have no money, some days you have so much money you don't know what to do with it, and so on and so forth. But he was in a weekly television show at the time, and everything was live in those days.
Right.
And so we were invited to go, and we went on Thursday evening at 8 p.m. was the show, and after which we had some lunch or whatever, dinner, after the show with a bunch of superstars. And I just never stopped going. And he told everyone at the studio that we were his nephews, so they would treat us well. Well, within 3 weeks, I was already in a television show.
Wow.
And I was playing little roles. I wasn't like starring in anything,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I was beginning to make my way. And I was working with the most famous people in the world
Right.
as far as we knew. But a year later to the date, we moved to the United States. So I figured, well, there goes everything. And then we lived in Los Angeles for a year and a half. And the excitement of being in the United States and being in a completely different environment was all I needed at the time. But then we went to Denver. We moved to Denver. And the school shows began. Junior high school, and college. Right down the street in Denver, Colorado. On the same street was our house, our high school, the college. Now, the college was a women's college. So the Mother Superior came over to our high school to recruit actors for the college.
Wow.
So I was doing the shows at my high school and the shows at the college.
Nice.
Now, 6 months into once I graduated from high school and started going to school there, which was a scholarship, then 6 months later, I got my first professional job with Bill McHale, who was the only professional producer in Denver at the time. He had a musical review. He said, "Well, you can't sing, but you can sell it. You're hired." And and from then on, he built shows around me for the next 10 years.
Wow.
But the Mother Superior, I went in and I said, "Ma'am, I got hired by Mr. McHale, and I'm going to go on the road with him." She said, "Oh, I'm so glad. The door here will always be open, but go on and work with Mr. McHale because you're a terrible student."
Your only hope.
So he took me on the road, and that's when I came to Nashville on the road, and we were doing the show called The Highlights of Broadway by Bill McHale's Highlights of Broadway. And this magnificent lady came backstage And she said, I'm casting this film. And she told me all these famous names that I have no idea who she was talking about. But I said, well, I'm in this show and I got to be in the show until June something. Well, can you come the next day to start shooting? Because Tay Garnett wants you in the movie. And he was the original director of The Postman Always Rings Twice. He was a wonderful director.
Yeah.
So I wrote to him and I said, my father is visiting me here in Shreveport, Louisiana, where we're doing the show. And he said, you bring your father. I'm sending 2 airline tickets and I'm going to put him in the movie with you. He'll be an extra because I was the waiter in the scene. It was all my scene with Yvette Benu, Christopher George, Yvonne DeCarlo. But they said, your father will be an extra in the movie and he'll earn a couple of $100 and he'll be with you and you'll travel together. Yay! So now, after that, we went to Oklahoma to see my younger brother who was in the Army at the time. And then I drove him to Dallas so he would go visit family. And I never saw my father again because he died while right after that I went in the Army. The U.S. Army had already drafted me by the time this movie was being made. And but the producer spoke to the colonel in charge and he said, if you take this kid, you're going to put a couple of hundred people out of work. So the colonel said, okay, when does he finish? Blah, blah, date. Okay, that's when he starts his military training then.
Wow.
So I came out of the military and I got the honorable discharge. And I came to New York to visit a friend of mine for 10 days. And he said, what are you going to do in Denver? There's nothing for you in Denver. He said, stay here. You can collect unemployment. I go, what the hell is unemployment? Blah, blah. So, okay. So, but soon after that, Bill McHale again. He cast me in Tea House of the August Moon. And off I was on the road again. And so here I was doing these wonderful shows, which were meant to entertain. And my purpose was at the time to entertain the audience. And that's what the directorial suggestions had to do with. That's what my choices had to do with. And so I was having a very fine time and having a lot of fun. Even the New York Times critic one time said he has a lot of fun on stage and gives us one too. So I didn't know anything about acting technique. And these wonderful actors, I was doing Charlie's Aunt, playing the lead, Lord Fankard Baberly, in Charlie's Aunt. And this wonderful actor and actress, husband and wife, said, have you ever been in a good acting school? I said, what is that? And so I started to think acting classes. And I really, no matter what I really wanted to learn was the craft of acting. So this magnificent friend takes me to Lee Strasberg's class in 1973 as a guest.
My gosh.
Well, I'll tell you, I have the same thing in common with Jeffrey Horn, a magnificent actor from the films and the theater. And he said the same thing happened to him. In 5 seconds, we knew we wanted to learn what Lee Strasberg was talking about. Wow. So I went off on the road again. I did Oklahoma for about 6 months. I did another production of Tea House of the August Moon. And then I came to the Institute in Los Angeles first. 1975, I finally started studying full time. I thought I was going to go for 3 months. Then I learned little by little that it was going to take between 7 and 10 years to learn the technique correctly.
Wow.
So after 9 months at the Strasberg Institute in Los Angeles, then I went back on the road again. I did a wonderful production of Oklahoma with George Lee Andrews and Marty Morris, beautiful Broadway performers. And we toured, and then I went to the Institute in New York. And that's where I stayed until a couple of years ago. I finally, needed to, I had been teaching for 25 years.
Wow.
I had been in the Institute for 45, studying and performing and teaching.
Yeah.
So I figured I really needed to have a little freedom to run off and pursue my work as an actor and everything. But Lee Strasberg instantly changed the actor's life, because the first thing that I learned was what I was explaining a little bit ago, that I was into entertaining the audience. And with Lee, we learned how to enchant ourselves with our choices so that we could behave truthfully in the imaginary circumstances. So I'm going to create a relationship with my brother or my son or someone in the play, and I'm going to make that relationship real to me somehow, even if I personalize it. For instance, I'm with John in the scene, and you're my son, and I want to save your life. Well, I may have a lot of love for you as an actor and a lot of regard and everything, but if you were my brother, then I would I would give my life for you. No question about it in my mind. So now I have an option to turn my relationship with you into the relationship with my brother. And I go, now I understand that I have got to save your life.
Right.
So
Wow.
all of this wonderful technique for the actor began, and no one understood the actor's instrument like Lee Strasberg.
Right. I wanted to ask you about him because what was exactly his approach?
That's exactly the question I was going to ask,
His approach
actually.
that made you just within just a couple of minutes know that this is the guy that would, because he has his, I mean, Al Pacino's and the De Niro's and all the guys that were
And that was the least of my. Trust me, that was the least of it. But
right.
when you first met him, you were like with an Einstein. So that just instantly, I'd never seen anything like that in the theater. I thought maybe in science or something. But what he understood was that it was possible to train the actor's instrument. For instance, the principal tool of the Strasberg technique is the physical relaxation of the muscles. It's a relaxation that is done on a chair, like a folding chair, not a comfortable chair, but like a folding chair. And it's like a meditative kind of different from meditation, because meditation tries to tranquilize the mind, while this, you don't allow the brain to get calm. But it is a very meticulous exploration of the physical instrument with some movement to understand if there is tension that needs to be let go. So you're training the muscles to relax just because they're being told to. So what Lee was explaining was small muscles like fingers, the facial muscles, the neck, and the shoulders, because everything bottlenecks on the way up to the brain. So little tiny details of what are the difficulties with relaxing the muscles so that they can execute choices in front of the camera or in front of the audience. Right. And so this wonderful relaxation exploration takes you through a meticulous attention. You give attention to every area of the face, the neck, the upper torso, the lower torso, all the way through the limb, whether it's the leg or the arm. And you move and drop the arms, you move the leg and drop the leg, and you are helping the muscles to understand that they're only using just enough energy as is absolutely necessary. And then you know that with those relaxed muscles, you then include the intensity needed for the scene, because your character is never relaxed. So it can't afford to be literal tension, but intensity that you have control over. That's what belongs in the scene. So first things first, the muscles relaxing, one of the things that does, it enables the inner life to come to the surface. So the emotional life of the actor is visible to the camera, which is what we love to see.
Right.
Because what we're talking about is behaving privately in public and not acting.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. That is like that's unbelievable. The challenge, I would think, as any anyone that begins that process or that journey, the challenge is to learn the technique, and this is why it takes so long to learn the technique so well that when you're performing, you're not aware that you're doing it's so part of who you are. It's innate in you that then you can actually do the actual work
Yes.
without
Now,
being
remember,
aware.
we always know we are dealing with a dual reality. I
Right.
mean, I know exactly what's happening out front with the audience,
Sure.
and I know exactly where the cinematographer is my date.
Right.
my dance partner.
Right.
Right.
So I'm perfectly aware of the literal reality, but much more importantly, I'm focusing on the imaginary reality.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. That's
It's
amazing.
wonderful.
Now, what is it like? So I hear the stories of actors who, and John and I have talked about it in the past, those actors who stay in character even when they're not performing, versus those actors that can just turn it on and turn it off. Is that something that you've worked on or
Yes.
teach?
Yes, because for instance, the first exercise in Strasberg technique is the breakfast drink. So it's a sense memory exercises. Now I'm going to deal with sense memory. I'm trying to remember the texture of the cup, the temperature of the cup. See, my senses are trying to explore a memory at will. So I'm focusing on this breakfast drink and the smell of it and the taste of it, etc., etc. Not pantomiming, trying to remember the sensory reality of the object. And then I finish the exercise and I come right back to the literal reality. I know the walls, I know the floor, I know the windows, I know whatever the literal reality, right back to it. So from the very beginning, I was trained to come right back to the literal reality, and that when I'm taking my curtain call, it is Mauricio, not the character anymore.
Right.
On my way to the trailer from the set, it is me, not my character. So because we do horrendous things in performance, I have been raping and killing people my whole life. The young woman is going to have to kill her children nearly at the end of the play in Medea and then go home and have dinner.
Oh.
So you're talking about a professional exigency, a professional demand for the actor to be healthy.
Right.
Right.
Because if you are now, there are no laws about this. You can work however the hell you want. If your performance is good, who gives a flying anything?
Right.
Right.
So the heck with that. But I want to not have to carry that horror on my shoulders. By the time the curtain opened in the lesson, which I was doing a couple of years ago, I already murdered 40 of my students that morning. Now, Lee and Stanislavski are asking me to try to make that real to myself. Well, fortunately, there is plenty of horror in my own life, and I can go there and go, nah! But this is what the audience needs to see. A person in despair trying not to murder one more kid, one more student, and you end up murdering her anyway. Now, I'm not going to reveal any of my personal problems on here, but then I go to some horrendous nightmare of my own. Unfortunately, I've never killed anybody yet, but other horrors have happened, and I can go there. What I did learn is, if I know that is going to hurt me, if it's going to ruin the joy of going to the theater every night, I don't work with that choice. But I'm going to play hardball.
Right. Yeah.
So you see how important it becomes to be able to just make the transition back into the literal reality. And very solid training helps the actor to understand that. But there are people with enormous talent, but they haven't been formally trained in it, and they're using it as they will, which of course is their right.
Sure.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's incredible. Another thing that I've heard you talk about is and I'm assuming it's part of also the training, the muscle training, is singing. How important is the singing aspect in this?
I can't imagine an actor not singing every day.
Wow.
There's a bike in the other room in which the breathing exercises start. You're biking and you're inhaling for 4 beats. You're holding the breath for 4 beats, and then you're exhaling and letting it exhale and exhale and exhale and exhale and exhale until you run out of breath. Back again in 4 beats, hold 4 beats. This is training from the vocal teacher. Now, the next step after that, which the opera singer from the Metropolitan explained, the first sound I make in the morning, is
That's right.
that's placing the voice correctly. And while I'm still on the bike, then it starts the Shakespeare. Thus far with rough and all, it's a speech which I
Mm,
sing for the purposes of giving the voice musicality,
right.
Right.
because the
Right.
audience is educated.
Right.
Absolutely.
They know the difference between monotone and something with musicality in it. The audience
Right.
is not a dummy.
Yeah,
Right.
So
sure.
the vocal instrument has got to be trained every day, because then I neither have to worry about it when I'm on a big stage, nor do I have to worry that when I'm not projecting, which I don't need to do in film, I still have expression and musicality in the voice.
Right.
So
Right.
Lee did not place enormous focus on this,
Mhm.
but it's something that to me, I figured, how are you going to get on the stage without the instrument getting wonderful attention?
Right.
Now,
Right.
who cares if you're a good singer, unless you're going to be a singer? But if you're
Right.
going to be an actor, what you need is singing and heightened speech, so that the articulators are getting a workout,
Absolutely.
like all the rest of the body is getting.
Right. Right.
Amazing.
The exercises that you'd have to do to learn, because Shakespeare, it's is a lot of wordplay. There's a lot of textures in the. There's a lot of inflections that you have to kind of like get in there, and every actor, would do it maybe slightly different, but overall, the sensibility of that character is the same.
Yes,
They're
it
going
is.
through the same exact thing.
Yes.
Um,
Now, depending on the director, the production may be much more strict, as in the iambic pentameter in Shakespeare. Naram, badam, 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 badam. So the director may be very strict and want the iambic pentameter and give a lot of attention to that.
right.
Another director may say, don't worry about it. You can't screw this up, which is what Lee used to say. So, but, but what you must be able to do is give your brain and your articulators enough time familiarizing themselves with this heightened language, so that you can also include the reality that you're trying to create.
Right.
I'm
Mhm.
playing the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, for instance. Well, I know when I'm trying to be dirty and naughty. I know when I'm trying to hide that I'm a dirty, naughty maid. I know when I love the little girl. I know when all of those things also. It can't just be language.
Mhm.
So it's something that I realize even as I rehearse scenes today, that how it facilitates my communicating something that is contemporary but a little bit complicated perhaps. And the because look, we're speaking a lot of the time lines written by poets,
Right.
Right.
Hmm.
whether it's Tennessee Williams, whether it's whoever the author is. You're dealing with wonderful language, and just what you are saying, you have to have a capacity to love it
Right.
and play with it and use it
Yeah.
to get what you want from the other characters in the scene.
Yeah. I heard you say you did a little snippet. I think it was on Instagram, where you said the if there was one thing that you learned from Lee Strasberg, like that most important thing, and it was, you talked about the performance really being for you first, then for the audience, and that's in theater, in film as well, which is a little
Yes.
bit more. It's a little different in film, because you have to start your, like, how do you do that, like when you're on a film set, the audience is not really there. You do have an audience, the crew, but they're busy working, right? They're not even looking at your
That there no,
performance
that's not
sometimes.
an audience. Absolutely.
Right, that's not an audience. So you have to kind of think that it's got to go through that lens, and you have to communicate that same thing that you were communicating through the theater, through that little lens, and it's got to project, but not project vocally. It's got to project with the inflections
Well,
and all that.
in my early experience, within about 3 months of my being at Strasbourg, I started taking classes at the Institute with Shelley Winters. And she was explaining just what you're talking about. And she said, in the first of all, Lee always said the difference between theater and film is child's play, because what then the way that Shelley explained it. And on the stage, you speak loudly and think softly. In film, you think loudly and speak softly.
Right.
Oh,
So
okay.
That's
this
true.
is a magnificent technical challenge.
Right.
No director has ever not had to bring me down, whether it's theater or film. I always thought, "Wah!" And then the director, whoa, 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 let's get very good, very good, little by little. Now, with film, the thing that's missing is that other element that has to hear and see the thing, because the element that's hearing and seeing is so intimately here with you. That's the cinematographer, the camera.
Right.
That's the beautiful something that is the love of your life, the
Yeah.
most enchanting thing, that is what you live for.
Yeah.
And you know that you speak things the way you would if you were in truthful circumstances. You don't have to worry about the
Right.
projection of any of that.
Right.
But you are completely clear about your intentions. You're completely clear about how you interpret what is happening to you in the scene now.
Right.
And yes, of course, you're able to. Sometimes we scream and hoot and holler in real life too. Not because we need to project, because we're not going to scream at each other. We have to scream.
Right.
Right.
Because we scream loud. When we scream,
Right.
we scream.
Right. Right. So,
The
so
neighbors, now we're having a fight.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the challenge, is it difficult though for to go and actually, because there's a freedom when you're in the theater. There's a freedom where when you're on a film set, there's a little restriction. There's the blocking can be very
The
limited.
theater too.
In
In the
theater
theater,
too,
you
yeah, but
do
you have
the
the stage,
exact
right?
same thing 8 times a week and try not to become mechanical.
Right, right,
Right. That's
But
true.
in the
Yeah.
theater, I put my glasses on at the same time. I do the exact same thing with the glasses. I take the pen and I throw it in the same. I do everything and my intentions in the theater are the same. In other words, you are expecting me to become a little hostile during this beat in the scene. And that hostility is something you're expecting in the scene as an actor because you have scored a response to my hostility. So the whole production is expecting my hostility, whether
right,
it's film or whether it's theater. The other people are expecting that. I don't have the freedom to, oh, this evening I'm going to try it funny. No, there is a union representative in the theater. And if you are
Mhm.
not doing what you're meant to do, what was set, then the stage manager will say, Mr. Bustamante, we need to get back to what was
right,
staged by the director. If that's not possible, on Thursday, which is rehearsal day, we will rehearse it so it gets back to what we said, or we will have the director reset things, but you don't just change something.
right.
So the constraints that you are referring to exist in both.
Yeah. Okay. And in film, do you feel that the performances get a little, because you have a director, usually it's much closer to you than when you're in the theater. The director might be actually having dinner while the show is
Yes,
going
yes.
on.
In
But
fact, even out front, even as you rehearse,
right,
the director may be out front having dinner. That's happened.
that's happened too. Yeah, I'm sure. So it's a little bit. You have the director right there with you on every single scene. Is that, you find that more helpful?
Well, they vary. The directors vary.
Right.
Sometimes the director is a little bit, you know, that they're with you a little bit on the set, and sometimes they set everything that they need to set and they disappear even to another room. They're watching the scene from a
They're
monitor in a
right,
different
right,
room. But these are technical uh, things that we have to adjust to, as for instance, so this particular shot is much more intimate. So if the director is allowing the proximity of all kinds of equipment and people near here, then we know we are in a most intimate little moment in the scene. So you realize that it's a much more internal
yeah, yeah,
focus for the actor. And then, as you say, the production gives freedom for more movement, but it's movement that is set as a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in film, strangely enough, sometimes there's a little bit more freedom than in the theater, because in film, every take is like a rehearsal, because we
Right.
haven't been rehearsing.
Right.
So the takes are like rehearsals. So,
Right.
okay. And sometimes the director will even say, don't worry about the specificity of the line, just use it as a guide. Now, and then, so you start experimenting, and then it can have some freedom that is almost improvisational.
Okay.
Everyone is in on it. So there is that possibility in film that we don't have in the theater.
Right. Right. Okay.
Do you think that every actor should do theater as well as film?
I do.
Okay.
Because you learn to carry the character in your heart and in your mind for the entire time you are in the theater.
Mm.
So you learn to focus that kind of through line that takes you from the beginning to the end, the prior life of the character.
Right.
You are focusing very specifically, as I was trained, to start my work of sensory exploration for things that have to do with my prior life.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I murdering the children when they come to take a class from me?
Yeah.
For something that happened to me, which Mauricio decides is this horrendous tragedy in my childhood. That's the horrifying thing that I'm dealing with. I don't want that to happen anymore, but it can't be helped. I can't. So don't forget that sometimes I get excited and I forget what we're talking about.
That happens to us all the time. Don't worry.
I would worry if that was only happening now that I'm in my 70s, but since this has been happening since high school, it doesn't really bother me. Whatever, we don't even know where we are. What the hell does it matter what we're talking about?
That's true. Very true. One question I had for you when you're putting the teacher's hat back on is, do you? I mean, obviously, teaching so many people in your lifetime, do you see some people that come in that just have a quality, right, and you see it right away? And if they do, and if, let's say, someone doesn't have that, can that be taught or learned?
Oh yeah. Kelly O'Hara comes into class. I have no idea. She does a scene from The Glass Menagerie. Now, we're talking about a brain that has selective memory at best. That's what Anna Strasberg calls it, selective memory. I have no idea what the hell is going on at the time. I still remember her work on the scene, and I was saying to her after the scene was finished, I said, when you walked away from him with your hobble, with your little malady of your foot, all the way to across the room to pick up the little toy you want to share with him, it looked like the longest walk in the world, because she's disabled a little bit. She has a limp. Mm-hmm. And this is a boy she's had she's been in love with this boy her whole life, since high school. And he's come to call on her. So she's going to show him her Glass Menagerie. Now, this young woman, when I see her on the stage, the thing I was saying to her one evening was, Kelly, you are guided by a beautiful genius that is in you, that you simply just fall into character. You develop the character fully, because she is completely different in every performance that I see her. Whether it's King and I over there, or whatever it is, she's completely different and so truthful. So that was someone who had it from day one. Now, she had been focused, her primary attention, on the singing, but that singing gave her a sensitivity, a sensibility that absolutely carries her through the acting, which she is very serious about. Mm-hmm. Now, what Lee used to say about the actor who did not show promise was that they, with time, can become sterling.
Okay.
And he also mentioned, it is very sad to see when a real talent doesn't work hard enough.
Right.
Because often, not often, but sometimes, someone with less talent accomplishes much more because they're willing to work hard.
True.
Willing to work hard is the key. Marlon Brando and Al Pacino are two people we've always admired. You know what those people do? They work their ass off all day and night. Al Pacino will read the play at home, then he'll read the play at the actor's studio, then he'll have rehearsals at some studio, then they'll do an off Broadway reading of the play, then they'll do then the play is on Broadway, then this is while he's doing another film and all this. So Marlon Brando I never met, but my teachers knew Marlon enough to know that everyone in New York knew that was the hardest working actor in the city.
Wow. Right.
And those are the advice that one is smart to take seriously, because you say, no, you work your hiney off.
Yeah.
Now, I'm experienced and I have blah, blah, and talent and all, but I go to acting class. Why? I don't want to wonder if I'm doing good work. I want to go over there and see how far I'm going to fall on my face, and whether the rehearsals are going well, and whether I'm being able to accomplish some of the things we've been talking about tonight. For instance, can I wake up in the morning in the scene and not want to talk to the guy, and hate the guy, and want nothing to do with the guy, and not act, but be ready to kill the guy? I don't want him in my house, this fucking guy. I gotta go to work on this. I want to go to bed at night knowing when I speak to the shrink on Wednesday, I want to say the work is coming along nicely. I feel good about my work.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the intensity that you were talking about, like Al Pacino, and when you run into somebody that comes in, a lot of people come to New York City and they have stars in their eyes, and they're going to take one class and they're going to shoot up to the sky, you know,
and they can, and sometimes
they
may.
can.
Sure.
You're right. There's some, you know, this business is really strange, right? There's luck involved as well, but that luck can only last you so long if you don't have that training in place. And I think you see it happening with younger actors that suddenly, boom, they hit. And then at some point people are realizing, well, they hit, but
it doesn't last. It doesn't
last. Right. What's your advice to actors out there that are considering, you know, taking on this challenge and coming either to New York or LA or wherever to study this craft? What would you say?
One of the wonderful theaters around the United States. Remember, we have a magnificent group of theaters, the Lord theaters, like the Guthrie and the Alliance. These are magnificent theatrical institutions, for instance, who have beautiful teachers in them. And not only are the teachers teaching the craft in the theater there, in the classes, but then the students can work their way up and be, small roles here and there. And of course, there you are in a theatrical institution, all ready to even be cast if you're lucky and you're working hard enough, etc. Or you come to New York and you do what many of us have done. You find a little job so you can pay your bills,
Right.
And you go to acting class. And if your day is not 18 hours long, you're wasting your time.
Don't bother.
Right.
That's what I always say.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely.
So
Because you got to go to work 8 hours a day.
yeah.
Then you have to go to class for 4 hours. And you have to rehearse and you have to practice. Don't make me laugh. I tell them, if you're in school and you have a life, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I had one more question. Sorry, George.
Go for it.
What's being done to actually safeguard the teachings of Lee Strasberg? Is there, I know there's been some documentation and there's been a ton of books written and people like yourself are continuing that. Is there something specifically done other than the school itself and to really safeguard that? Because I get nervous with how things are in the industry. It's moved so fast right now that it's I don't know how much effort and work people want to put in because things move so fast. And it's like, I don't have 7 years to put in to study this. I'm giving myself 6 months, And that's insane, you know.
Insane.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to get your thoughts on in the 40s and 50s, maybe probably more in the 40s when the studios were out. Remember, somebody would get signed in one of the studios, and they had acting classes, dancing classes, speech, dialect
They were
classes.
entertainers. Yeah.
Everything was in there within
Absolutely.
that it was almost like a school for film for filmmakers and actors.
And they were being paid to
And they were
train.
being paid while they were doing this. So I mean,
Yeah.
what a world. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something with the safeguarding of the work and then moving forward into this new digital crazy world that we're living in?
Well, the great teachers of the 20th century, Stella Adler, Lee Strasberg, Sandy Meisner, these were the people that Uda Hagen, they transformed the landscape of the American theater because they went to Russia and learned from Stanislavski and his disciples that what we were talking about earlier, that you are enchanting yourself with your choices as an artist. You are trying to create reality, behaving truthfully in the imaginary circumstances, being truthful. So all of that was being worked on very diligently by these magnificent teachers. But now the students of their students are the ones who are working, but technical work from the 20th century isn't going to go into the 21st century. I don't think so, because I see it in the technical work that I learned is not being passed on as effectively as all that. And we ask ourselves all the time, we don't think there is room for one more generation of actors that will, in other words, we don't think it's going to last another generation. And it's because a couple of the things you mentioned, which are true. Who wants to dedicate that kind of time?
Right.
Someone who is in love with the craft of acting. Someone who really, really, no kidding, wants to do their very, very best. Now, the problem is the teachers today are no Strasbergs, no Stella Adlers, none of that. You know, when you met those guys, you went, well, hello. Today you are excited because you're meeting someone who knew them.
Right.
So it's, realistically speaking, now I'll tell you that I see something weird going on in films, and it's what I call whisper acting. Everybody is talking like it's like we are in the bathroom, and we don't want anyone to hear what the hell is going on in the scene.
Like everything is shot in the library.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on in the library? And I'm gonna kill you fucking family. And we're in the park. Yo, who the hell has a fight with them? So I don't know what that's not a technique. I was joking around online when they say, where do I get how do I learn to do whisper acting?
Right. I saw that.
How do I not in the scene behave like I would behave if I was this person in my office? Why do I have to start whispering? When would I ever fucking whisper in my office if I'm dealing with a bunch of thugs?
Right. Exactly. And that might be part of that.
That the technical work of the 20th century is genius will come that I think will continue to make a difference. Now, there's a man by the name of David Gideon here in New York, a magnificent teacher who had a very beautiful relationship with Lee Strasberg. He was practically Lee's right-hand man, artistically I'm talking. And he told me he's training a couple of wonderful actresses that will be able to carry the work on.
Oh, good.
But he is someone that I know that is doing that. People that are coming out of the actor studio and are teaching the stuff, I don't see the Lee Strasberg technique. It's something completely new that's not Lee Strasberg. But David Gideon and the people he is training, there's hope in my mind with him.
Yeah. I mean, there are going to be people that are interested in carrying that because, and it's always, they may not be prominent, everyone, but like, for instance, George and I are musicians and we listen to the blues and we listen to jazz, and that's the best music really ever made. We love rock and roll as well, but that was really what we what we dive into. So there are musicians now that are taking that, and jazz is huge around the world. It's still, because I think the purity of something is eventually going to be seen,
Yeah.
especially with like what we went through with some of the TV shows like in the 80s and the 90s. It seemed like they were really struggling to try to come up with something. Not all of them. There are a lot of great shows as well, but
Uh-huh.
it just seemed flat in what you were talking about, even whispering things, very low
Whereas
key.
I have recently gotten hooked into a Downton Abbey, for instance. I'd never watched it until the last
Okay,
couple
yeah,
of
my
weeks.
wife watched the whole thing. She
Now,
loved
every
it.
single actor in that thing, from the servants to the extras to the top of the line, they've been working on Shakespeare since they're 8 years old.
I
Right.
know.
Right.
It's in the
They,
schools, though. That's another
of
thing.
course. So every single one of those people has been in the theater their whole life.
Right.
And look at what brilliant work they're doing on camera.
Incredible work. Incredible. When you look some of the British, just even the comedies, they're so they're so technical, and you think it's humor, which should be somewhat free, but it's very well thought out, and
Very,
it's
very well thought
brilliant.
out. Now, have heard things about the English actor that fascinate me that have to do with language, with Shakespeare, that the syllables and the words affect the actor internally in a
Yes.
way that we don't understand as clearly here in America. They let their external choices affect them. When
Right.
Richard III is crippled, the actor is letting the physical choices affect him. But the words, the vocabulary, the dialogue is affecting to the
Yeah.
actors. And so they are incredibly sensitive in performance, and they have arrived at it from the outside to the inside as a rule.
Correct.
Of
Right.
course, many English actors understand the internal work of the American actor, and vice versa, the American actor too can be
Right.
quite fortunate if they've been working in the theater with all the classics and everything, and also in film. Of course, they're getting a very similar background that an English actor would have gotten.
Right. And I'd worked with Ruth Cullerman in New York, and she did the British technique. So that was exactly what you were talking about. It was really pulling out the emotion out of the actual words themselves and in the text, which was really, really different and
Yeah.
really hard to do. But it was the most rewarding, I thought, when you read something now, even today, when I'm reading anything, I can pull from these texts or whatever book I'm reading the character even better. Not that I'm playing the character, but I'm understanding the character a little bit better. So there's methods out there that I think really complement each other
Yeah.
when you really studied all of them.
Absolutely. No, they do. They complement each other beautifully.
Yeah.
The combination of the two specifics that we're talking about right now, the approach from the English actor and the approach from the American actor, they complement each other beautifully.
Yeah. So you mentioned George. I'm sorry. Do you have
No,
a question?
go for it. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I wanted to ask about the young actors that come to New York. I worked in the health club industry for a while, and I learned that when I was hiring for my front desk or whatever, if you hire actors, it's wonderful because they're constantly. I used to tell them, well, this is like pretend there's a theater, and the members will come in and they got to sign in and do a performance. It's membership, and I
They
made
let
it.
your personality blossom
It
a
was
bit.
fantastic, and everyone I hired was great. But the one thing that I saw almost all of them do was get distracted with New York City.
Yes.
They would go out. Everyone has a birthday. Every weekend there was somebody's birthday that was celebrating. I was just like, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? And of course, now it's been over 10 years, maybe 15 years at this point. And, they have wonderful lives, but they didn't pursue what they were originally, that I saw that in their eyes that they wanted to pursue. The distractions in New York, how is someone going to, how were you able to actually put those things aside enough where you can dive in and do? I mean, I know Al Pacino used to sleep on the stage in the theater because he didn't have a place to sleep, so he would just sleep on the stage. Everybody would show up. He would clean. I mean, this was a man who was obviously obsessed.
That's
In a good
the
way.
difference. Obsessed.
And Marlon Brando as well. What are your thoughts on that? Like for somebody younger coming in here to keep away from How do they do that? Because I've seen it all so many times. It makes me sad.
I say it all the time. New York City is a classroom.
Hmm.
Now you come here to learn. You
Right.
go to the museums, you go to the ballet, you go to the opera, you go to restaurant week. The finest chefs in the world
Amazing.
are
I know. I
putting
love
out food
wrestling.
that you can afford for once if you architecture, what sports, music, you talk about it. New York City has to offer it. So the tricky part is not falling into the craziness that you were describing, which
Yeah.
who isn't going to fall into that craziness? I was lucky because I came here already in a play. You know,
Right.
I'm one of these crazies. Everything falls on my lap on a silver platter. But I already had something I didn't want to lose. By the time I moved to New York, I'd already been touring the United States, starring in the play, and knowing
Wow.
what that felt like, and knowing what I did not want to lose, why I couldn't afford to be a friggin' drunk, which I stopped drinking 20 years ago, why I couldn't afford to drugs. Forget about drugs.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
thought nobody ever heard of it, and I worked with a disciplinarian. Bill McHale was a paternal, loving, wonderful man and a gorgeous disciplinarian. No one was ever absent. No one was ever late. None of this nonsense in any of the thousands of performances are no nonsense. So I came here very lucky, protecting a
Yeah.
treasure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I already met with other artists who were similarly engaged. Most of my friends by that time were also already playing on Broadway and everything. So I was very, very lucky in that respect, because if I had come to New York empty-handed, so to speak, to start, wow, we're talking about a friggin' impossibility here. We're
Yeah.
talking about you gotta be crazy to pursue it. We
Right.
were laughing about that earlier.
Right.
Like Ruth Gordon used to say, you gotta refuse to look at the facts.
Right.
That's how you succeed.
Right. Right. So I guess it's important for them to go and find like an actual acting coach early, a good class to get into
Yeah.
right off the bat as priority,
And start
and
doing
dive
scene
in,
work. Exactly.
and don't look back. Yeah. I'm sorry, George.
Yeah, I was going to say, with that experience that you have through all those years, because I know you work with kids, and
Yeah.
so I'm pretty sure you have those conversations with kids and stuff. How is it working with kids? Because I could only assume attention span is an issue there too. You know?
Yeah.
Genius.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, the child who is brought to a school like a Lee Strasberg Theater Institute or an acting school in New York, talk about, you walk down the street and so there's a little science school for children 5, 6, 7 years old, or dance or theater. Now I've gotten so excited I forget what we're talking about. But
About working with
the
children.
children. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my God. First of all, they want to know why I have so much meat down here. I said, if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to go, right? Now, they explain something to me. I wrote scenes for them to rehearse, just so they would learn how to rehearse with each other. Excuse me, the scenes that you write are lame.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
They're lame. I go, well, you know what we need to do is that maybe you guys are going to have to write something that you like. As a result of which they start writing their own play.
Wow.
The Camping Nightmare. Everybody dies, including the wolf. Now that's what we're talking about.
Now that's theater.
Yeah.
I don't want to share my bedroom with my sister, whatever. Nonsense. No, the friggin' wolf is dead and then the next thing we're flying to the moon and we're doing all sorts of things and we're bugs and we're all sorts of crazy things. That's what we're talking about. They come in one day, they say, we need all the lights out today. What? No. Oh, we've got to have all the lights. How do you? They nearly stopped them. They got what they wanted. They turned all the lights out in the theater and they all had lighting instruments, they had planned a whole improvisation in the dark with their little lighting equipment and magnificent surprise for the teacher. And here I had to remember a rule that I learned from Harvard University. children hear the word no 80 something times before they hear the word yes,
Right.
and they learn through yes, not through no. So I'm
Right.
saying, shut your stupid trap, you fool.
Yeah.
They're smarter than you are.
Right.
And they say, can we please do Shakespeare at the end, because that's the easiest.
It's the easiest. Wow.
Oh, and then why do you want to marry a boy? My mommy, I have two mommies. My uncle has a husband. Oh, bro, 8 years old. They start a whole town
They have the
meeting,
whole thing going.
a town hall meeting about sexuality and the new
Oh
way
my
of
gosh.
life. So they simply have something that they haven't lost.
Right.
Right.
I was
Exactly.
just gonna say that it hasn't been beaten out of them from life and experiences and
Uh-huh.
individuals that
And when I see them in the class, the one who wrote, Easy was her name, Easy. She's the one who wrote The Camping Nightmare. A couple of months later, she was on the Broadway stage in the musical about the dancing boy. I'll remember the name of the musical in a moment. I remember how,
Evan Hansen.
no, a little earlier,
Oh,
Billy Elliot.
Oh,
Billy
Billy
Elliot.
Elliot. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And I remember that the institute was having a lot of difficulty at the moment, and they didn't want to hear anything about vulgarity in the classroom, etc., etc. And I said, no, there's no vulgarity in the classroom with the children, for sure. But once in a while, they ask me permission. Can they say a cuss word? I go, once you can. You can curse once, no more. But the little girl goes on the Broadway stage at age 8 or 9. The first word out of her mouth on the Broadway stage is, "You look like a dickhead to me." The other little boy is seeing dead people, right? And so the children are having to deal with crazy stuff in the theater and in the films.
Right.
So you're giving them a lot of leeway because they themselves come up with crazy stuff. They're
Right.
improv. They want to improvise on being on lockdown.
Oh God.
That is
Wow.
horrible to me.
That's
I
terrible.
would
Yeah.
never dream of putting him through that. They
Right.
ask for it. They want to do it. In the 2016, every improv have a Hillary and a Trump in it. They're genius.
It's the ultimate in creativity, those kids. That's it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I wanted to quickly before we wrap up, I wanted to geek out a little bit on some actors. Like we were talking about Marlon Brando a little bit. There was a shift when Marlon came on the scene on how on acting really. There was this fast paced. Hey Maria, where are you gonna go there? Man? Oh yeah, so there was this kind of tempo that went on in the 40s and even onto the 50s, and then Marlon
It
Brando.
was presentational.
It was a
Yes.
presentation. It was like, "Hey, Maria, where are you going today?" I'm gonna, and it was this, and it probably came from the vaudeville
Yes,
stage
yes,
and all
yes,
that
yes,
stuff,
yes.
right?
Absolutely.
And but then Marlon came along and changed everything, and not only him, but the people that were around him. He seemed to also change them as well. Like I
Yeah.
think I just saw recently on the waterfront again for something, and there's scenes in there that you can't find any scenes like that earlier or almost since either. But what's your impression on somebody like that?
You see why he was a great somebody or other? That's the thing. Now, Stella Adler had a wonderful influence on Marlon Brando.
Right.
And she was able to help him understand this that you're describing, this truthful behavior. And she approached it differently from Lee, but she was going after the same thing, which is truthful behavior under the imaginary circumstances. She focused a great deal of attention, I believe, because I did never study her work, but I believe she, with her and with everybody, everything starts with interpretation. But she did focus a great deal on the little things that characters do that make them unique. The stuff they carry around, the props they use, the way they dress, the activities they engage in that help the actor understand this what's coming from inside.
Right.
But it was really Stella Adler that was able to get through to Marlon, and then of course at this point also Lee is in the scene, and Lee and Stella are working with all the best known actors in the film and theater at the time, and they're all working on the same issues of relaxation, of truthful behavior. There's a very funny joke of one of the great actors of the 20th century. He says he has a nightmare sometimes that he is dead and in the coffin, and Lee comes over and does like this and says, 2 10s. Lee used to check our relaxation. Check
You're not dead enough.
2 10s. So it was the passion about the technique.
Right.
Wow.
But we had, like I described earlier, when you sat with Stella or Uda or Lee, forget about it.
Yeah. They just had an insight into human condition and the approach.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly that.
So I feel like we could go on and on.
Me too. I could talk like this until the cows come home, and they're in West Virginia.
I love this conversation, and
Me too. Thank you.
George and I would love to have you back again.
Yes, sir. Oh, it would be a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love it. So thank you so much for being on. Just hang on 1 second. We're going to be with you in a second.
Thank you both.
End the show. I'll be right back.
Very, very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir.
All right.
Wow.
Mauricio Bustamante.
That fantastic,
dude is awesome.
Absolutely.
This is that. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm looking at the time. I couldn't believe it was an hour. And
I know it flew by. It
an
just
hour.
went by.
Wait a minute. We just started. So we're definitely going to have him back again, and we'll dive into so many other issues and stuff. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate you. Thank you, George, for putting up with all my questions and cutting you off.
I enjoyed it.
I was just too excited.
No, it was great.
But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you all again next week, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Counterparts. George Batista, John Henry Soto. Have a wonderful week ahead. Take care of yourselves. And as always,